Journey. Just a little background on myself. My name is Patrick Gerhart. I'm president of Telcoin Digital Asset Bank here in Norfolk, Nebraska. Before I got in with Telcoin, I was a traditional banker. I was president of a bank here in Northeast Nebraska for many years. And right around 2021, I had dabbled in crypto a little bit, not a whole lot. The biggest thing with me with crypto, what got me interested was honestly my first understanding of what the blockchain was and how it was utilized. Not just within the finance industry, but just in general. Other industries have used blockchain for a great many years for keeping track of goods and services within their company and system. Once I realized that it's really just this great online, transparent, immovable general ledger that you can utilize for many different functions, specifically within finance, and that kind of got my spark going and how it could possibly be utilized within the U.S. financial industry, specifically banking, which is what I come from. Now, Telcoin started in 2017. They created their own native token, Tel, which you can go out there and buy right now, along with their own digital wallet, which is still, which is out there. You can use, download, and utilize. And around 2020, our founder and CEO, Paul Nooner, was talking to his old college roommate from Notre Dame, then State Senator Mike Flood, now current Congressman Mike Flood, about coming into the United States and getting into the banking industry. Because right around that time, Wyoming passed their legislation for their speedy banks. And, Paul mentioned to Mike, I'm kind of looking at going to Wyoming, getting into this because Paul, is a visionary, and he's kind of saw the future in it. And Mike's like, well, why go to Wyoming? Why don't we do this in Nebraska? So then, Mike was a state senator, and he brought up the Nebraska Financial Innovation Act to the unicameral here. And it still blows me away because most people who have any background in policy and legislation knows that a lot of times something new could take years to really kind of hash out. Yeah. And luckily for us, he had previously been a Nebraska state senator in the early aughts here, and did his time there, went away for a while, came back in, so he knew the process. And within that first legislative session that it went through, it passed. And that's kind of when I got introduced to Telcoin, because while I was president of a bank, I was also part of the Nebraska Independent Community Bankers Association, which is a trade organization here in Nebraska. And I was on their governmental affairs committee. And well, this was brought to us. And this is the first time I'd seen anything really like this. I'd heard what was going on in Wyoming. So we met with the Wyoming bankers, kind of heard what some of the hurdles they had. As you can imagine, this is early days of this type of crypto banking. And a lot of bankers, including myself, were quite skeptical at first, because this was new, it was kind of being shoved to us. We had never really read anything like this before. But within a couple of weeks, I'd done my homework, talked to a lot of people, talked to Telcoin, and realized that this is kind of the future of banking. This really could be. Again, at this point, I had understood, like I said earlier, the blockchain and the implications of what that could do as a benefit for the financial community. And so I was kind of pushing. I was one of, I like to say, two bankers who were in the state of Nebraska who were kind of like, wow, this actually is going to probably be something. We might want to get behind it. Anyway, the bill passed, went through committee. It was signed by Governor Pete Ricketts, now current state senator for Nebraska, Pete Ricketts. And I was kind of at a point in my career where I was kind of looking for something new. And their legal counsel reached out to me, who I'd known for a great many years, and said, hey, would you be interested in running the operations, being president of this bank? Because I know you're looking for something. And I'm like, you know what? This actually might be a great thing to get a part of. So that's kind of how Telcoin was started and how I kind of got interested and brought in. So in 2022, I came on board and started the application and business plan for the Nebraska Department of Banking and Finance.
That was 4 years ago.
That was 4 years ago. Yeah. So the Nebraska Financial Innovation Act allows the Nebraska Department of Banking and Finance to basically regulate digital asset banks in Nebraska. So while we were starting up our institution, our banking side, the Nebraska Department of Banking was starting up their division, their side of their department to deal with this. So it was a lot of learning between both of us, a lot of going back and forth, because not only did we need to know what the department wanted from us, not just in terms of what we were going to do as a product, but also kind of how we were going to run. We also need to know how they were going to regulate us, what kind of compliance needs we need. And when it came down to it, the application is basically a de novo application for a de novo bank. which to me was.
So for those that might not know, can you explain what that word means?
A de novo bank is a brand new bank. It's starting a bank fresh. Since the 2008 financial crisis, there's only been a handful of de novo banks, traditional banks in the United States, that have been granted, because it became so much harder to get a charter. So you now kind of have a background of an idea of kind of the mountain we had to climb to go through this, because it wasn't just policies and procedures, what we're doing for our business plan, but also kind of the capital requirements and those things that we had to kind of get set in place to move forward. And those can be quite daunting from, let alone a small bank, a mid-sized bank, it would be, hard to do, but even, a large one on top of that, because you have a lot of time and resources you have to dedicate to it. So over those years, going back and forth, understanding what was needed from us, understanding on their end what we were trying to do, in February of 25, we got conditional approval after all those years, 2.5, 3 years of working on this, conditional approval by the Department of Banking here in Nebraska, for the charter. And what that means is basically like, we've taken your business plan, we've taken your application, we accept it. You need to do a handful of other things, such as finalize capital, risk and stuff like that together, get our leadership team in order and whatnot. And a few months of that going through, making sure we cross our T's and dot our I's, we were finally in position to where they granted us the first charter in the state of Nebraska in November of 2025.
So explain, who's the customer that's going to be part of your bank?
So customers, our goal is to get everyday people into crypto, into stable coins. And it kind of goes back to our start of, basically, crypto started as this very niche area, stable, all type, not just stable coins, but all types of digital assets. And if you don't have a good knowledge of it or a background, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around if you're an everyday American consumer. And personally, I believe for the everyday American consumer to get into this realm, the banking industry is a great starting point, because you have the U.S. financial industry behind you. You have the regulatory backing, you have the guidance, you have the federal government, which is strong. It's, if not the strongest in the world, it's very close. And where do people have trust? They have it in their financial institutions when it comes to money, safe places to store their money, get money lent to them, invest in products. So starting up a digital asset depository institution with the regulatory agency, such as one for banking, in our mind, is a great first step to get everyday people who have no background in crypto, specifically stablecoins, into that marketplace.
So how is a digital asset bank different than an exchange?
Digital asset bank. So what you will be able to do is you'll be able to apply for a bank account with us. Okay. So you go onto our app, you will be able to apply basic AML, anti-money laundering, know your customer, all that stuff that you would for a normal bank account. And you will be able to, once we approve you and one of our partner bank of ours, because we cannot hold fiat currency, so we have to be attached to a traditional brick and mortar bank. You will be able to, once approved by both institutions, you'll be able to, let's say, ACH money into your bank account with that account, through our app to that bank. Let's say you do $500. Okay, this is basic. You mentioned product basic understanding. You'll wire in $500. Once it hits your bank account, it'll then be swept into a reserve account, where that's where the backing one-to-one of the stable coins. We will mint what we call our EUSD. That's our stable coin. We will then mint that to you, to your decentralized wallet. So pretty simple process. We call it minting. Money comes in. The money goes into the reserve account with the bank. We then mint on the blockchain EUSD. From consumer perspective, it will be like opening up a traditional, checking bank account. But at the end of the day, your balance will always be zero, because that money goes into the reserve account with the bank that we are custodian over, and all that EUSD goes into your decentralized wallet. So you are still custodying, the consumer is custodying themselves that EUSD. So you will have like a traditional bank, you will get bank statements, but it'll always be zero because there's no fiat currency ever in that account outside of the pass-through into the reserve. Yes, it is relatively reasonable, which kind of goes into the benefit of this whole operation in the first place. As everybody or most people who are listening to this know, transferring, utilizing crypto is a fraction of the cost of transferring and moving around fiat currency. So let's say you want to buy something. Okay, this is a great question. This is a question I love talking about because we are farther ahead now because of the passage of the Stable Act last year than I ever thought we were going to be at this point in time. As I said earlier, it takes a long time to get legislation usually passed through, especially on something new. It usually takes a couple years, a lot of, behind the door talking, trying to figure out, who's safe with what. But the fact that Congress passed Stable Act last year was huge. And that put not just the US government kind of in the spotlight when it comes to cryptocurrency and specifically stablecoins, but also the banking industry, because you had a lot of people who were either cautious or skeptical over this realm of finance, all of a sudden going, okay, the US government is pushing forward with this. We got to start talking. I've talked to so many peers, bankers across not just Nebraska, but across the nation, who out of the blue are like, okay, this is here. How do I learn more? Like, partner banks that we've talked to in the past are like, we're just not there yet. We're not there yet. All of a sudden out of the blue are like, hey, maybe we want to get into this, because it goes back to what I was talking about, the US banking system in the first place. It is a very trusted institution as a whole. It is a very safe place to go for people to utilize, to save money and utilize different products. So the fact that banks are now looking at this going, okay, we have the backing of the regulators, technically, hopefully the Clarity Act comes through here soon to help kind of define a lot of those different, it's not just, yield as people are talking about, but there's talks on, AML, KYC that need to be kind of ironed out. So the fact that we're moving this quickly in a good way, not like, fast, a lot of times people think fast or quick can, you can miss things up. But I think the way the policymakers have been going about this with the education they've been getting from the crypto industry on top of the traditional banking industry, because it's got to go together, and really understanding each other and the needs of each one's has been huge. I think we're going to see a huge uptick, especially once the Clarity Act, finalized and gets passed, not just within the crypto industry, but in, US banking. Because all of a sudden the OCC, the Federal Reserve, FDIC has a basis to build their guidelines and frames, their what they need for compliance and regulatory framework for us to all do this in a safe and sound manner. And again, I'm a traditional banker, so I'm going off of, what's the compliance aspect? What's the risk? What's, like how do we do this in a safe way that not only protects the banks, but most importantly, protects the consumer? That's our biggest thing, because if we don't protect the consumer, we're not going to have anything.
Yeah.
So why would I want to get involved? If you have had an interest in crypto and have even played in it a little bit, started a Coinbase account, MetaMask account, whatever, played around, but haven't really had the ability, or more importantly, the educational aspect, because that's a huge thing. It's not just with the bankers educating them, but also just the everyday consumers understanding what this means to them in their everyday lives. I mean, we still got a ways to go. We're still working on, point-to-point transactions for businesses. The ability to take, one thing we're working on is, a debit card, to point-to-point transaction, pay for things with stable coins. The ability for businesses to utilize that, and because the demand's going to be there from their customers at some point. They're going to have these DeFi wallets with money in it and that they can use readily. Yeah. And they don't want to have to like trade things out, trade USDC and then, transfer their bank account and stuff like that. They want to do it instantaneous. So education's the big thing. Learn everything you can. Follow what's going on in DC. Follow what's going on in a lot of these exchanges, including Telcoin, because we're trying to lead the way in a lot of this. But I think once the educational aspect happens, they'll understand the ease of use, the low cost, the speed of these transactions moving. And honestly, out of all of it, the number one thing I think is the transparency in it all.
I agree with you. Well, thank you so much for being our keynote for today for our global summit. We're about to go right now to our first panel, which is all about institutional adoption and the different ways that institutions are navigating that with the different products and services. So thank you so much, Patrick, for being here.
Thank you.